Legends Anonymous. It is me, your host, Wise Papa Smurf, here with nobody because all my co-hosts are filthy, dirty-ass traitors that don't show up on Wednesday like they're supposed to. So I'm going to throw an audible today. We're going to record anyway. This has happened a couple of times. We may be behind an episode. There was supposed to be a TFT episode that was going to come out, but I'm not on those. So if that didn't come out on time, I blame everyone else but me. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different than what I normally do. Today I'm going to go over a video that Riot put out. Riot put out a video called LOL Please, and it is about the state of the game. And hopefully, as I play this video, the sound comes through because I want to play what Riot says, stop it, react to it, and then keep playing what they say so you guys get a general feel for what it is that I am talking about. And I may end up having to just rip the audio from the stream to do this, so hopefully it sounds good in the end. But here we go. I have fast forwarded. This is from the Riot released video on March 12th, which was 5 days ago. It was on the client. It's called LOL Please. It used to be Riot Please, but they want to do LOL Please since they have multiple games now, so hence LOL Please. Okay. In the section titled State of the Game, you get an interview with one of their developers who here he is, and he's going to explain some things, and then I want to have a brief moment to react to that point. So here we go.
Hey folks, my name's Andre and I'm the game director for League of Legends. We're going to be talking today about how the preseason item update went and the overall state of the game right now. Looking at items first off, we think we've got in place a system that should allow some good increases to choice and diversity for most champions. At the moment,
Okay, it's important that they said that. So remember that. The goal of the preseason item update is choice and diversity. Moving on.
though, individual item balance is often overshadowing what could be interesting choices. Items like Sunfire or Gore Drinker have just been universally good choices for the damage or healing they bring. And so one of their first priorities has been chipping items like that down so they're not just dominating in terms of raw stats. On the other side of things, we've then also got some items that just haven't been delivering. So we've been doing work on things like Chemtech Putrefier, which we've been broadening the feasible users there. In addition to that stuff, we're also looking at adding some new non-mythic items.
Okay, so before I get into that, we have certain items that are too strong. We have other items that are too weak. Okay, I mean, that's going to happen. That happens in every meta, that happens in every elo. It is an impossible goal to strive to say that all items are going to be equal and the only thing that will make one item better than another item is the situation that you find yourself in the game. So in other words, you have all what Riot ideally I think wanted to design with this system is at any given moment in the game I say, I could really use sustain here because I'm in a bad spot. So I'm going to build the sustain route this game. And that's going to be equally good on my character as if like maybe I needed to go the magic damage route in a different situation. So I could veer off and take that as an opportunity instead of going sustain. But I have all these realistic choices that give me real and meaningful build diversity and choice. Okay, so what they're saying is they have a couple of items that have crowded out other items and they're going to nerf those because they're too strong, and that's removing choice because you don't really have a choice except for to build the best items. Okay, fine. I don't have a problem. I mean, there's nothing objectionable about any of that, right? The problem is what the stated goal is versus what actually ends up happening, and we're going to come back to that. But the stated goal here, okay, you're going to bring some items up that are underperformers and drop some down. It's March. You had the entirety of the preseason to figure out that Sunfire was too strong. Anybody could have told you that in the first week or two that played against it. You have, yeah, anyway. All right, we're gonna move on.
to fill in some gaps. A couple of examples of those are an enchanter item we're trying that's meant to be good against dive or anti-carry heavy teams, or a tank item aimed at countering split pushes, so that even if you're not a split pushing champion yourself or able to just 1v1 a split pushing trend or whatever, there's still a good item to turn to in those situations.
Okay, my problem here. If you have an item that's good against anti-dive, it's an enchanter item. Enchanter items are notoriously useful across all classes of mage. Any mage is helped by mana regeneration, hit points, whatever. These are universal enchanter stats where it's like, I'm going to give you some sort of mana regeneration and then maybe some health on top of that, and then some sort of a passive that's going to be supporty. In this case, it's a passive that's going to be good anti dive. Okay. The problem is an item like this negates the power of an entire class of champions and is good on more than one class of champions. Also, most enchanters, the reason that they are not picked consistently, even though they pretty well fucking are, is because they are weak against assassins. If you have an item that negates an enchanter's only weakness, because remember, there's a triangle in League, and that triangle is that you have like a rock, paper, scissors, where all in beats sustain. Sustain beats poke. Poke beats all in. You poke them and they can't get to you. So whatever. And like sustain, you don't get a chance to sustain because you're dead. And poke does nothing into a sustain lane because you're going to poke me and I'm going to regenerate it all right back up. Right? This is the fundamental triangle of balancing that exists in the bot lane. If I can no longer dive and kill your sustainer, who beats sustain? If one item negates that in my kit, that I can no longer get on you, uh-oh. Like, behold, it will be the era of enchanters. I've not seen anything to do with this item. They haven't done anything other than introduce the concept. I am super concerned right already that you are even thinking about putting this type of item into the game. The other type of item that they mentioned is a item that is good against solo split pushers like Trendemir. The problem is when you build any of those items that would be like good against solo split pushers, traditionally those items are built by solo split pushers. If those stats are good against you, then those stats are good for you as well. I don't know how you build an item that gets around that dynamic, but I'm sure there may be a clever way or two. I'm just I'm just very much like this has the potential to go very, very wrong. And I hope they put a lot of forethought into it as to like, okay, so what do we do? Like, how do we trigger this in a way that triggers for the defender but doesn't trigger for the aggressor? And the other thing is, like that aside, why do we want an item that's good against split pushing aggressors? That's all they do. So if you have Trendemir, okay, you're a Trendemir main, and somebody can negate you with an item. What do? You team fight now? You're like, no, because you suck at it. The only thing that you're good at is split pushing. If they can negate you, you have no champion. Like, they should be. Okay. From a balance perspective, on my point, it is fine to have champions that counter other champions. right? You picked this, I'm going to pick that because that's a really good pick into this. And the determining factor of whether or not I'm able to pull off my victory is my skill, right? I shouldn't be able to choose to negate your champion after that point. Like, oh, you picked Trendemir. Well, I didn't pick anything that can counter that or match it in pressure or beat it early, so I guess I'm fucked. Is now, oh, I can just like, you know, screw your excellent fifth pick with an item. I'm super concerned because items are purchasable by anybody. And I don't think that build diversity means always having an ace in your sleeve. I don't know how they're playing this. I don't have a lot of faith that these are going to be good additions to the game because the niches that they've described needing or wanting an item for are things that prevent snowballing and prevent a champion's win condition. That sucks. That's something that doesn't need to be in the game. Like, it just doesn't. Well, oh well. Like, I obviously am not on the balance team. They obviously don't listen to me talk often. So I I hope to God that they do this right. Because I will admit that if done correctly, these have the potential to be cool ideas. My other concern is that it indicates that Riot is moving in a direction that is, we want the game to be winnable by anybody at any time, right? Like, we want dramatic comebacks and we want you to have options to get back into the game at any point in time. I think that that creates trouble. Like on paper it sounds really good, right? Like, oh, I'm not out of it if I make one mistake. I don't get fucking snowballed to death. Well, let's just talk about that for a second. In silver, gold, plat, even in low diamond, that doesn't happen. Those games are winnable because everybody makes enough mistakes that are exploitable that you can come back in literally any game at any elo below the highest tier. And once you get into the highest tier, they've kind of settled on if you fucked up early, you deserve to lose. And so this is a problem that realistically doesn't need fixing. The other end of this problem is this whole game is steeped like a tea bag in hot water in toxicity. Your teammates have no interest in coming back in a game. They've already checked out on the third mistake. Hell, sometimes the first mistake. I don't think that the mental state of the players is strong enough that comeback mechanics are going to do anything to emphasize to players that they should stay in the game because it's still winnable. If you don't have that mentality, you never had that mentality. There's a Reddit post on this not too long ago that said basically, with players having weak mentals, it makes it very unsatisfying to play a late game hyper carry because solo queue never goes to late game. This feels almost exactly like that. Like, okay, so solo queue is supposed to go to comebacks. When is that going to happen? I I don't see that very often in solo queue for sure. Like, it's rare that I get a team that's full of like hard fighters that just want to win at all costs. It doesn't matter that you're behind, friend. We're gonna do what we can to pull through. Like, no, that's some like children's movie shit that doesn't really happen here often. Anyway, I've had cases where it has happened. I'm not going to take that away, but it's not something that you're going to see in every ranked game. It's just not. So, planning these comeback mechanics are really only frustrating to people that are already winning the game. Like, yeah, you made a bunch of mistakes and I crushed you like 4-0. I deserve to win lane and then push that advantage down and win the game because I created a definitive advantage. I don't want Riot giving that back. Whenever you invest heavily into anti-snowball mechanics, all you're doing is diluting the value of the early game. You're diluting it in favor of mid-game team fights. And if Riot has decided that mid-game team fights are what League of Legends is all about, then reduce the value of the laning phase. Make towers fall faster. Lose tower armor. That's the whole point. Last season or a couple seasons ago, you made tower armor because you wanted to emphasize the importance of laning phase because that was core to the identity of what League of Legends is. And now, well, if you get an advantage of laning phase, we want you to be able to come back. What does laning phase fucking matter then? Like, if you give me 10,000 avenues to come back after I completely fuck up the game because it feels bad to fuck up the game, then what the fuck does the early game even matter? The reality is the importance of it has gone down over time since the advent of tower plates. That was a spike, and then it's been diluted. At least it feels like that. So I don't know. These changes are like, we don't want to give you more power in a direction, which I would be approving of. Like, hey, we have this class of champion that, like, we don't think burn champions have good enough items, so we're gonna give them more. And they did that when they talked about Leandries. Like, we want to make Leandries kind of useful for a lot of different mages to use, and we want to make Ludens useful for burn mages. So we increase the passive to where it would also be applicable. Okay, that's great shit. I fully approve of that. You're giving people more options for power. Cool. Now, what I don't like is items that are like, we want to give you an option against burn mages that nullifies burn mages. What? Why? Right? And if there's like a counter item to build against every champion, that doesn't create item diversity and choice. It like locks you into, oh, you build this item against that champion because that's strategically what the item is for. You'd be an idiot if you didn't build the anti-split push item against Tryndamere. So you've now lost choice in build diversity. You don't get to build the way you want to build. You get to build the way against Tryndamere. Right? You don't get to choose your power. You choose your defense. I don't I don't agree with that approach. But I think they have gone, like, they did do the choose their power thing, and it's great. And then at the same time, they do this other shit that I'm like completely not agreeing with. And I don't know how to reconcile those two things. So, anyway, uh, Mr. Abstruse chimes in on the chat and says, my duo and I won a game in mid-silver where we got obliterated for the first 15 minutes. We started to play defensive, and the enemy team just kind of suicided their league. I thought for sure the game was over early. Does Zanya serve a similar role as an assassin blocker? Where do you think it fits in? Okay. Zanya's is an interesting thing, and Stasis in general is an interesting thing. I think Stasis is better on Bard's kit because it takes skill to aim it. It can obviously be a double-edged sword. Um, Stasis, yes, it is an anti-assassin thing because you're trying to get an assassin to blow all of their abilities on. You're trying to get an assassin to blow all their abilities while you're invincible, right? I think it's interesting. To me, Zanya's functions as another summoner spell that you can buy, and that summoner spell is become temporarily invincible, right? The true value to me of stasis is not avoiding getting obliterated, even though it is, and it is an anti-assassin item for that purpose. But the true value of the item to me is I get to wait and have my cooldowns come back while I'm in stasis. So it gives me a secondary burst. That is the part that I think is really cool about Zanya's. It also makes it an incredibly abusable item. Like if your cooldowns didn't go while you were in stasis, Zanya's is nothing. right? You're just dying a little bit later. And so maybe you can avoid the hammer falling. Like if your team shows up to back you up and pushes the guy off your body or something. But like that time frame, that time you're buying is what you buy with Zanya's, which is why it's an hourglass. Um, I think it's a cool item. It is anti-assassin, and yes, it's bought into assassins a ton. Um, and I think because of it, they have to tune, like assassins get to be tuned high because there is an anti-assassin item. So anybody who doesn't buy that item is on the chopping block. Like Zedult is fatal if you don't have Zanya's or you don't build enough armor, you don't whatever, right? That's that's fine. So if I'm laning against a Zed, I'm gonna buy that, but my support won't and my ADC won't. So okay, that's the guy who Zed pops now. So I mean, I can see this being a value, but if Zanya's didn't exist, they would have to nerf out a ton of damage in like Zed's kit. So there's two arguments to be made because obviously, if anti-items don't exist, then the champion itself needs to be brought down to a reasonable power level. But I think that's actually much more easily doable than providing these kind of things, right? But you can look at it this way. Flash has the same argument, right? You can make these really cool plays and nullify a champion's kit by flashing out of the way. You know, I'm nullifying Ezreal's ult because I flashed it. You know, I didn't get hit by the Nami wave because I flashed it. That's fine. I didn't get hit by the Karthus ult because I Zanya's. It gives you an opportunity for game-breaking plays as long as they're on a realistically high cooldown. I don't necessarily have a problem with them, but you do walk a fine line with those kind of items. And so, yeah, imagine you had Zanya's and you had an item that nullifies all in, because that's what they were saying. So if we have those things, how the fuck do you kill somebody as an assassin? Like, how do you do your job? I don't know. I don't know. It depends on what the item is, I suppose. But and I'm not necessarily talking shit on Riot here. It's just very concerning, and this is a yellow flag for me, not a red one, because I haven't seen the item in question. So I hope that answers your question on Zanya's. But let's go back to the video and hit continue.
Let's look at mythic items in a bit more detail. One of the things we particularly want to avoid is when champions are hard bound to a particular mythic. We're defining hard binding as when a champion buys that item in 75% or more of their games. Sunfire is a good example of that.
Okay, bullshit. Bullshit, 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 bullshit. You just said this. I'm going to skip to a different video. This is from the patch notes. This is Tyler 1. I do not like Tyler 1, as many of you may know. But he has a really good point here. Here you go.
W on hit damage effectiveness decreased. The change in Urgot and patch 1.1 was meant to be Kraken Slayer build on provided. He's veered off course. Skill limited rush, Titanic Hydra instead, reverting the. He's the only champion that does it in the game. Reverting this on hit modification, steer him away from the off build altogether and help him hone back in his primary build. Like, you dipshits preach build diversity. What other champion in the game goes Titanic Hydra first? And you're saying, well, this is to steer him back on his primary build path. Just revert the items. It's such a complete failure. You're a failure. Just revert it, bro. It's trash. We were hoping with the changes he would build a Kraken Slayer. However, because our mythical item was a failure, he still no longer builds that. So we're gonna, hey, you went Titanic? Nerf. So stupid.
Okay. So what he's talking about is Urgot just took a nerf on his W because his W synergized too well with Titanic Hydra, which he was building first. As Tyler pointed out, he's like the only champion in the game that builds Titanic first. And it's because of that interaction with his W. That is build diversity. He's making a choice of available options because of what synergizes with his kit. That is the exact thing that you are talking about wanting to have in the game. And then to say, as tongue in cheek as in the patch notes, we want to steer him back to his primary build path. What? What? I thought we were doing build diversity. I thought you built whatever the fuck you want at any given time. I thought that was the point of these mythic items, is to build whatever the fuck you want. As if we're going to ignore the fact that mythic items, there will always be one that synergizes with your champion better than others. Always. Because there will. Always. You may get a choice between two items that are situationally good. That is the best you're going to ever do. Ever. So, yeah, this is the exact type of build diversity that you are claiming to want, and then you're going to nerf it because it's not the build diversity that you anticipated wanting. I don't know what to say. You say the right things, and then when it comes to implementing change, you don't do those things. This has been my problem forever. Like, it feels like Riot is great at identifying problems and then not solving them. They'll say, oh, yeah, we think it's a horrible idea to build offensively defensive items because those things just get broken. And then they make them. Like, guys, please fucking stop. Like, listen to yourselves, because you're right about a lot of the shit you say. You have better data than the rest of us. Uh, good God. Like, anyway, that was something that I thought was particularly egregious with this point of view. It's like, yeah, we want mythic items to be diverse, and we want to blah blah blah. Like, no, no, I don't buy that. So I'm gonna back it up a little bit more.
The hard bound to a particular mythic.
Hardbound. That
We're
was the
defining
word.
hard binding as when
When a champion builds something 80% of the time, then you nerf Urgot so he goes back on a primary build path. What the fuck do you define primary build path as? More than 50% of the time, but less than 80? That's healthy?
champion buys that item in 75% or more of their games. Sunfire is a good example of that, with a lot of tanks buying Sunfire in 80% plus of their games. Post nerfs, that's down to about 45%, which we think is a lot healthier.
Okay. They're not hard bound on Sun. Like, you're creating a buzzword to describe something that is actually not problematic, right? Guess what? Ludens is really good on brand. Or it's not, but Leandry's is really good on brand because it synergizes with his passive, like it always has, right? Anybody who does dot tick damage, it synergizes with, as does Demonic Embrace. They both synergize super well with dot tick damage because it keeps putting new stacks on. Guess what item they're almost always going to buy? The mythic that was designed for them. That's not, air quotes, hard binding. That's, I have a synergy with the item. Now, if your item is like Sunfire Cape and it's just hands down the best tank item, you're not going to tell me that every tank in the game is hard bound to Sunfire. Sunfire's just overtuned, right? Like, this hard binding idea is somehow like pretending that champions aren't going to have a greater synergy due to their kits with one item than another. That's just not true. Like, they're doing the best thing they can with Ludens, and I wholeheartedly approve of that change. That was very clever. But I don't think it's going to change, like, I don't think it's going to change this kind of synergy, right? Like, the fact that all tanks are building this just shows that your item is busted. It doesn't show that any champion is hard bound to the item. This to me, like, so I went to business school in my undergrad before I went to law school. And the way business works in general, or the way it worked back in like the early 2000s, is we would take a concept and then we would throw a buzzword at that concept and then we would make you memorize the buzzword so you knew an idea and you had a way to communicate that not only do you know that idea, but you know it in the context of business, right? So it's not that things work well together, it's that we have synergy. And that's an old one. Everybody knows synergy now. But I mean, that was at the time. It was like, oh yeah, ooh, Six Sigma, synergy. Everybody gets something, an additional benefit out of being together. We don't call it teamwork. We call it uh, synergy. All right, whatever. That's just one of, I mean, that's probably the worst example of what I'm talking about. But it's that you throw a buzzword at an idea and then you can attach a meaning to that and people will understand it. That's what it feels like they're trying to do when they say they're hard bound to a certain item. You're making that sound like it's a bad thing. Like like that's not something that we should strive for. It's the opposite of build diversity. Urgot builds, he's the only one who builds an item that is diverse use of items. Everybody builds this. He's the only one that rushes it. Therefore, it's bad. I don't. I don't know. Like to me, the entirety of the mythic item paradox that they were going for, I thought it was a cool idea. I thought it was going to be incredibly difficult to work. I mean, honestly, my favorite system that they ever had was runes. Like runes and quints. Let me pick whether I'm going to have extra lifesteal or extra attack damage. I can pick and tweak my stats. That's useful. And it's everybody has the same ones. So we can all do it. And guess what? Certain runes are really good with some people and not so good with others. Okay, great. Like Draven's always going to run lifesteal quints. Those are always going to be better for him. He's going to get more out of a bloodthirster than anybody else. Like, okay, great. He's probably going to build that. That's not him being hard stuck on an like again, it feels like I want you as a consumer to see this in a way that I'm painting it as a problem so you'll identify it as such and understand why we are going that way when it's really not. Like I don't think that's a problem. It hasn't been a problem for 10 years. It's not a problem in season 11. But okay.
Fighters and assassins are also purchasing a pretty wide range of options in most cases. And marksmen are in a fairly reasonable spot, with all three of the mythics aimed particularly at them. On the other end of things, enchanters and mages, by contrast, we think need some more work on their mythic items, both in terms of the satisfaction from purchasing them and some of the actual choice architecture as well. Let's talk about a hot topic this year now: the amount of burst damage in League.
All right, before I get to that, because I'm going to go nuts on that, um, we feel like all these people have different options. The fact that Riot is wanting to push build diversity so much shows me that Riot is entirely disconnected with what people want out of the game of League. I don't want to play League and express my skill by which item I choose to build. I don't think anybody cares if items are a solved game, right? Like, I want to play. I want to measure my skill against an opponent. Like, yes, I want to be able to tailor my experience ever so slightly this direction or that direction as to how I want to play a champion. And I think items are meant to give that. This feels like items are meant to define my game. And if items are, because they're mythic, and if items are meant to define my game, then it's going to be whatever synergizes with my champion the most 99% of the time. Like you can't, if I get to pick one of these things and there's a huge punishment for selling it and buying a different one, then I get to lock in early and hope to God that the situation doesn't change. I mean, maybe if you put in something that was like, hey, you get once you buy a mythic item, if you want to change it out for another mythic item, you only have to pay the cost difference to do that. If that was a thing in League, then I would say, okay, build diversity, man. You have the ability to choose in any given situation which item fits you the best. Though I think that would be broken because your enemies would have no real. They'd have to be constantly checking what your mythic item is to know what it is you do or where your power spike is. But regardless, that would at least coincide with what this is because most people build a mythic item first or second. The game hasn't progressed far enough to know who's going to be the threat in the next 10 minutes. You're still like ending laning phase. Like how is that how is that a meaningful choice? Like you're just going to pick what synergizes best with your champion. It doesn't make any fucking sense. But I don't think anybody like I said, my point is this. I don't think anybody really cares what build diversity is in League. I don't think they care if it's a solved game. I don't think they care if it's like, oh, it's Draven. I'm making this shit up because it's the Draven build from like season 3. But I build Bloodthirster into Phantom Dancer, into Infinity Edge, into Last Whisper, into whatever other item I need at the time. Every game. They don't care. They just want to play Draven and have a fun time with that champion. That's what they want. This is unnecessary horse shit. All right, moving back on. Here we go.
Our goal with the preseason was to not increase the amount of burst damage in the game. Some of our initial tuning and design with items, however, did result in
Our goal was not to increase burst damage, except we did that so bad. Like, so fucking bad did we increase burst damage. Anyway.
burst going up. As a result, we've gone back and we've removed a bunch of that systemic front-loaded damage, making changes to things like Duskblade, Lichbane, Luden's Echoes, etc. We're still monitoring and talking about burst pretty actively. We think it's probably acceptable, though very much on the high side, but might end up taking a bit more out of the game in the moderate future.
Stop. Okay. You think it's high, but acceptable. I actually like burst damage. I think burst damage is fun in League of Legends. I think it rewards good players for recognizing when they have an opportunity versus making the game a sustain fest. Because if you don't have burst, what do you have? Sorakas. If you can't blow up Soraka, she heals you up and then that's it. The game becomes a sustain. Remember the triangle that we talked about, all in, burst, poke, right? Okay, like clearly burst shifts that dynamic in a way that I think is actually good. I have more fun playing burst champions. I think it's more skillful. Therefore, I prefer burst. Not everybody agrees with me, and I understand that point. Right? I'm not saying that if you love playing Soraka, that you shouldn't be able to do that. I think you're a terrible person, but you should be able to play your pick, Hitler. But that being said, that's fine. Like I'm not gonna shame you beyond what I just said. Uh, you should be able to play your champion, but the level of burst has been insane this season, like way too high. And the problem is that this, unlike other seasons, the level of burst is paired with lifesteal and omnivamp and other sources of healing that are baked into the game. They refer to this later as systemic healing. In other words, healing that is inherent in the system that you can buy and it just stacks and stacks and stacks till you can just heal, heal, heal. Okay, the problem is that heal has synergy with burst. I don't think burst would be too high if you could kill the burster. But the problem is they can take a lot of heat, burst somebody to death, regen up 60% of their health back, and then do it all over again until they run out of enemies. That's not a healthy play pattern. Like, healing is so high, burst is the answer. Burst can't go any lower without healing first matching it. You have two problems here. Burst is actually the answer to your other problem. I don't know how you balance that. It's definitely a problem. I mean, they are hitting systemic healing. Hopefully that does something. But the fact that you have so many options for healing is realistically a problem. Okay, here we go.
And on a related topic to burst damage, we should talk a bit about systemic healing in League. You know, healing that comes from items and runes.
I didn't
We do
actually
think healing
know
has
this
an
was
important
tied
place in
together
the
right
game. Without sustain, some of the lane trades can end up just being so punishing that you get forced back too easily, and the game snowballs massively. But we don't want it to be invalidating a lot of play and decision making.
Okay, that is a very astute point. If you don't have sustain, then whoever has the highest upfront pop wins every laning phase. Because if I can go in and burst you for 60 and your counter is 30, then I'm going to do that. And then the next time I do that, you're dead. Which means that you have to back or concede the lane to me because I first punch harder than you do. And if there's no mechanism to recover that damage, then there's no back and forth. We have stagnant gameplay that results in, you know, those like slap fights that you see, like the huge ass meaty dudes stand across the table from each other and look at each other like they have like uh, to poop for like 3 days, and they just stare at the other person, and then one of them reaches back and then just slaps the ever living shit out of him, and then that guy kind of stumbles for a minute, and then he gets up and he looks back at the other guy and he's like, oh shit, he's going to hit him back, and then the other guy stands there and then he bam and just hits him, and then you see who the fuck falls over after they hit each other like gorillas for a while. Where was I going with this? I had a thing. I swear to God, I had a thing I was going to tie into this. But yeah, it's like the guy who slaps the hardest automatically wins, and it usually happens in like the first slap or two that somebody goes down, right? The guy who goes first has a pretty strong advantage because you're not going to slap as hard as you could before if you just got the teeth knocked out of your face, right? And so, okay, without the sustain there, that's that. I mean, the game's decided based on who carries the biggest stick in the early game or who carries the biggest stick through laning phase and deprives the other person of the most resources. Cool. We don't want it to be based on that, though that has a place in the game. There are Dravens, there are, early game strong champions that is the way that they try to win the game. Cool. We want that to exist, but we don't want it to be so oppressive that you have no answers or there's no skillful way to get into the game or to counterplay it. Cool. That's the role healing is supposed to fill. That being said, we're way the fuck out of balance. Anyway.
Like it can when overtuned. Some of our item changes ended up introducing more systemic healing than we felt was healthy for the game. And that results in things like grievous wounds feeling too mandatory and ship damage just not mattering. As a result, we've gone back and we've hit some of those sources of healing, things like Moonstone, Ravenous Hunter, Gore Drinker, Ravenous Hydrate, etc. For some, straight nerfs. For others, we've wanted to shift some of that power towards durability in other forms. Let's shift gears now and talk about role strength in LoL, and how that...
Alright. I'm just going to let that part of it go because that was like a lot of talking about nothing without even saying anything. And I'm not trying to. Okay. I'm going to make up a problem and then I'm going to talk about it as if I'm answering the problem, but I'm really not saying anything at all. Right? Like, we recognize that there's a conflict between fundamental fairness and the ability of people to compete. So, when the playing field is not perfectly level, it results in a situation by which there is unequal play, which feels unrewarding for people. However, there are always people that are going to be naturally better than at an activity than others, regardless of how much work they put in. It's not fair to those who are naturally talented to be handicapped, but at the same time, we want to encourage hard work and the ability to persevere over natural talent as well. So in the coming weeks, we're going to look at options to honor both of these playstyles and to let both people come to the table and have a meaningfully good experience. Okay, I just identified a problem at length. I said nothing to solve the problem. I just said in fancy words that I kind of would, in the future, talk about it. And it didn't actually do anything. That's what that last bit felt like to me. Is okay, yeah, you've identified a problem, all right. No real answers are attached to that, but whatever. Here we go. Next.
That's going at the moment. We want to ensure that all the different positions have a meaningful impact on the outcome of the match. Some positions will be more about scaling, or roaming, or vision control, or whatever than others, but every position should be relevant. When we first launched the preseason though, Marksmen and Enchanters were in too weak a spot, so we've gone and made some changes to give them some more early impact. Junglers, on the other hand, were in too impactful a spot, overly deciding games by themselves, and so we've gone and removed some gold and XP. Finally, let's talk about snowballing rates in League.
Okay. Junglers are too impactful. I would agree with that. Junglers are too impactful in the game right now. Removing gold and EXP, it feels like you're just making jungle less rewarding and giving them less opportunity to express skill in the game. I mean, fine. There's a fine line there. If you think they're too strong, you've got to bring them down, and any hit on that power results in, less ability to play make. I get that. It's the problem that you've identified is fine. The problem that I have is I don't know exactly the length at which you're going to remove those things and still have people that want to jungle. Um, yeah, okay. ADCs don't have enough agency to win a game. Oh, Lord. We have said this of ADCs. This is the perennial ADC complaint. It's not March unless ADCs are bitching about their ability to carry the laning or carry the game at any point. I want to be strong in the lane. I want to scale. I want to be the guy who wins team fights. I want my positioning to matter. I want to be the skillful player. ADC and mid are the roles of narcissist. Like, there is not that all ADCs or mids are narcissists. You pick those roles because you have feelings of grandeur. I want to carry this game with my skill and expression of my abilities. It's not like that's what it attracts. Like, just like support players, attracts cool handsome people. It's the same kind of a deal. Like, it's obvious. Like, that's what's going to happen. Um, but realistically speaking, ADCs are in a great position. They've been consistently in a good position. They just hate the fact that they don't have control over everything at every phase of the game. Guess what? You should be beholden to your support in laning phase. It's how your champion is designed, right? It's not that you don't have any agency in laning phase. It's that you are dependent upon another person early, just like I, as a support, am largely dependent on you. And I hate that because you're an idiot. So I have to carry your drooling ass across the finish line virtually every fucking game. Like, guess what? I need to have a point in the game where I am strong. I need to have a point in the game where my decisions matter beyond when I use a shield on you. Like, that's not meaningful gameplay. I'm like, oh my god, did you guys see? Did you guys see when I used my Locket of the Iron Solari? Said no one ever, and everybody doesn't give a shit about that play because realistically, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, I mean, it does. You may actually save the game doing that. But realistically, Does it feel like the play? Or does it feel like the Jin that survived and killed like 4 people is the hero? Right? Where is my opportunity to express my skill? Where's my role satisfaction? You don't get it all. You have to share, asshole. I need a certain point in the game where I feel like I'm actually able to do shit. Like, that's laning phase for me. You got the rest of the game to be good, right? The other thing is like, how can you complain? You just got Gale Force. That item is fucking broken. Like, you have the ability to heal for yourself, dash in, and kill the shit out of virtually anybody. Like, what? What the fuck are you complaining about? You don't automatically win it doesn't feel impactful to be an ADC. I make Hash huge constantly, and he carries games constantly. Like, if you're good at what it is you do, then guess what? You're going to have an impact on the game. Right? Like, I get that enchanters, you know, enchanters don't have a lot of those like feel good moments, but that's kind of the way that their kit is built, right? Like, not to take credit for everything that Hash does, he has his moments. He plays team fights super well, but regardless, um, he's Macho Man Randy Savages himself up some kills every now and then. But that being said, you know, those moments exist in the game. Just because you don't have them the entirety of the game, like if you want that, go to a solo lane. Go play top. Go play mid. Play jungle. You have opportunities to carry the game the whole time. Just make sure you mute chat because everybody's going to blame you for their failure because you're the most impactful person on the team. There's pros and cons with every role. And role strength, like there are seasons where I felt like roles, and fuck, dude, I've been victim of role strength for, of the last 8 years, 4 of them. It wasn't shit. Whenever I first started the game, supports got 1 item, and then we built wards. We had a sightstone, an item, and then we built 3 million wards. And we would carry them around in a big bag of wards. And our abilities wouldn't do shit, and the only thing that mattered is that we were disruptors. That's it. It was the most unsatisfying way to play support ever. And then they gave us gold. And support got fun. And now supports can do things, right? And ADC's a bitch, because, a support can solo me, and that's such bullshit that a support is able to solo me. Guess what? At the end of the game, you can almost always solo me. Because that's your power spike. That's where you're strong. Like, I guess unless I'm playing like Viger or something that's super bursty and I got myself ahead, yeah, you can solo me. So what? I have a power spike at some point. Like, let me have that. But yeah, I get the junglers are too impactful. I don't think it's true that ADCs aren't. And the other end of it is Enchanter supports, like, yeah, we're in a burst damage game right now. Enchanters aren't great into burst damage. Like, you're at the weakest point of the meta. Your shields aren't, like, yeah, a shield is great. But if the dude does like a health bar and a half of damage, your shield doesn't mean shit. Anyway, let's check the chat. Hash is in the chat complaining about what I was saying. Hash does some things to make himself large too, says Hash. Yes, I agree. That's fine. Anyway, here we go.
Whenever we do a major update like a preseason, Snowball is one of the things we track particularly carefully. From what we've seen, looking at the metrics we track, Snowball rates before and after preseason are very similar, so we think we're doing okay there. Having said that, this is also one of the things we'd like to focus on more in the future, get to an even better spot if possible.
I'm going to stop real quick. Snowball is something near and dear to me. I like the games that snowball and that end quickly. I think that those games uh, tend to be, and this is, I'm just throwing this out there. Feel free to disagree with me, listeners, and tell me all about it. Those games feel to me to be less toxic because the game just ends. And I'm not stuck with these pieces of shit, right? Like, I get that there are some people that's like, no, it's more toxic because your mistakes matter more. That Fed Gragas top is just going to take over the game. There's not a damn thing I can do about it. And that makes me mad. Well, it's like, okay, so what if you're mad? It's going to be over in like 3 minutes, right? Like, it is what it is, right? Or the guy's going to make a mistake and give you back a whole bunch of kills, and then you're fine. Um, Anti snowball mechanics put a break on the game in the same way that, like, all right, I was going to say something, but it's political. Well, it's not really political, it's fact, but people are going to take it as political. Um, the way that taxes have a disproportionate effect on economics, right? Like, tax in business is viewed as waste, right? The more you tax it, which is like why taxing cigarettes so high distorts the supply and demand curve where people may want to buy, there may be a shitload of people that would buy cigarettes for 99 cents, but maybe they won't if they're at 5.70 a pack or $6 a pack, right? So we're going to tax it from 99 cents to like 6.70 to discourage people from buying it. Okay. To me, anti-snowball mechanics operate in the same way. If you get ahead, normally you would take risky plays in order to push your win, push your advantage, because if you die, you're giving up 300 gold, but you could take out 2 or 3 people. You can't do those things if you are worth 1,000 gold bounty, right? You'd be giving back 3 kills worth of gold to somebody just for dying. And so I have created a disincentive for you in the same way that taxing your cigarettes to 6 times their normal price would be a disincentive for you, right? That's not a political thing. I don't care about cigarette taxes. It's just meant as a perfect example of what it is I am talking about. It creates a waste in the system where supply and demand would be more aligned if it weren't for this tax, right? Granted, it creates a waste for a purpose, so I don't want to get into all that, but understand that that difference in where we spread the scales is waste by design, right? Anti snowball mechanics are that too. And I don't think it's fair to put a noose on somebody that's winning, right? Or like a leash would be a better analogy than that. Is to say, okay, you're winning, so I'm going to take away options from you so you don't run away with the game. Or so if you do try to run away with the game and you fail, you're extra fucked. I don't think that's a good deal. But I will admit, and I do agree, snowball mechanics have been almost exactly where they were, or it feels like they're exactly where they were from last year. I honestly wish, and this is concerning to me, that they feel like that's a good thing. I wish they would dial back on that because I think we built way too many anti snowball mechanics into the game last season, and I think it has actually increased people's dissatisfaction with the game because we're making the game go artificially longer. And while people perceive mistakes as mattering more than they actually do, so it's like, oh, this idiot went 0-3. We're gonna fucking lose. I'm toxic, and also I'm stuck in this game for an extra 25 minutes because guess what? It's not going to end anytime soon because of anti-snowball mechanics, so I get to be a dick to you for 30 minutes now instead of 20. Okay. Like, But realistically, the same anti-snowball mechanics that are keeping you mentally trapped in a longer game are also giving you an opportunity to come back in that game if you weren't freaking the fuck out right now. But you are. I would rather games just end when, you know, just be decided. Let the better player win. We don't have to Mario Kart the shit. I've said this a long time ago. It's like blue shells in Mario Kart. The further you are back, you get lightning bolts and blue shells and all the really good power ups. And if you're in the front, you get 3 fucking coins. Or like old school Mario, a feather to tickle your ass with. It's useless garbage. But if you're in the back, you get the lightning bolts and the bullet bills and the chain chomps and all the really cool shit because we're trying to get you back to first place. If you're in the back, you've driven like shit. Drive better if you want to win. That's the way a competitive game is supposed to be. This stuff is not that. I don't want anti snowball mechanics deciding my game. I don't want the guy who's losing to always have the opportunity to come back. I don't think that's healthy. And I think Riot, it is concerning to me because I don't think Riot recognizes that as being a problem. And a lot of listeners have wrote into the show and said, we like anti-snowball mechanics. I like to be able to come back in the game if one of my teammates fucks up. I mean, they never think like when the shoe's on the other foot and I'm massively ahead, oh my God, there's nothing more fun than giving up 1,000 gold bounty. But fine. People may like that better. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it is concerning to me that Riot is leaning into that and accepting that anti snowball is in some way positive for this game when I don't think it is. And I don't think a lot of players at higher levels feel that way either. Like I think the higher you get up the ladder, the more people are like okay, grandmaster chess games, somebody will see that the game is going to be over in 10 moves and they're like, "Okay, I give up, new game." And there's no hard feelings there. Right? That never happens at the bottom of the elo ladder because people just fuck up. They also don't see the plays coming, so they don't know whatever. People also in League want to do that in like silver. Oh, the game's gonna be over because they got ahead. It's fucking silver. The game's never over. Play it out. You're not a master tier player, right? Um, you know, I think that there's a fundamental difference, and I think snowballing hurts the top of the game. And I think rather than making anti-snowballing a priority, I think you should make getting better a priority.
And so, comeback mechanics, especially, are one of our potential focuses for this year's coming preseason. We particularly want to address cases where you're behind and it just sort of feels a bit hopeless. It's unclear what you should do to get back in the game. Or it's clear, but it's basically just wait for the other team to screw up. So we're exploring ways to give a losing team plays they can try and make when things aren't going their way. Thank you for watching, folks. Here's Jess again.
I'm not going to go into why I think that's a super dangerous thought process, other than to say I've already fucking said it. That is terrifyingly, stupidly dangerous and nullifies early game advantage. The same early game advantage that you wanted to maximize by creating tower plates as a functional objective to solidify an early game lead and to punish somebody for being pushed out of lane by a superior laner. So we do that, and then none of it matters because we're going to generate plays that somebody can make when they've fucked up to get back into the game. Why is it a bad thing that you have to wait for your opponent to fuck up if they are way ahead? Why is it a bad thing if the game is hopelessly lost? Because flip that coin. That means if you have a hopeless win, or like a guaranteed fucking win, that this is it, all we have to do is walk it in, why shouldn't that be a win for your team? I feel like everybody and their dog would say, yeah, whenever the game is over and I've won it, I want to win it. But when the game is over and I've lost it, well, I don't want that. I want to have a chance to be able to do something. You cannot have both. I would rather reward the winners for winning than make my wins uncertain. That doesn't it doesn't add up to good for players, which I think this whole fucking video launched me off on the deep because I'm feeling like Riot just doesn't understand what their players want out of the game. And they're just moving in whatever direction that they think this game should be about, and they're wrong. Either that or they're misguided. I don't know. Oh, the rest of it.
All right, let's get into the client.
Yeah. Okay, so the client's
client's
fucked
obviously
up. Client uses too many memories. The client's buggy. We know that. We're going to fix it. Game clarity. We want to maintain silhouettes so you understand what champion you're playing against. We fucked up with Dragon Fist Lee Sin. We're going to try to do better on that. Okay, fine. They also have a new champion and they're introducing some Space Groove skins. We have reached the end of the video and anything that I actually care about talking about. I hope you all enjoyed this. I tried to do something a little bit different that I thought would be relevant. I hope it was fun for you. Aiden seemed to like it in the chat. So, hey, Aiden, what's going on, man? Come back on the podcast sometime, you prick. Anyway, that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And, I hope whether you agree with me or not, whether you completely back up what it is I'm saying, or whether you think that, anti-snowball and shit like that is good for the game. That's fine. You have a right to that opinion. And maybe Riot is talking to you and I'm the one who's left behind. Maybe I don't understand what the players want. I think I do. But who knows, right? And the idea here is that I want you to think about what it is that you think will make League a better game moving forward. And I would love to hear your opinion on what that is. So hit me up in Discord, talk to me about it. Let's have a back and forth, or shoot an email, whatever, or leave some feedback in the episode feedback channel in the Discord when you come play, and we can talk about exactly what makes this game truly great, because it is, and it's been my favorite game for 7, 8 years now. I just want it to stay that way. So with that, I'll say thank you guys to everyone who supported the podcast. I truly appreciate you. We had another $50 Patreon who I'm going to shout out next episode if I remember. But thank you guys for those of you who have supported the podcast. I truly appreciate it. You make everything that we're going to do or that we do here possible. And, thanks a bunch. So this week's episode shout out goes to Reed Cowan. Thanks, Reed, for supporting the podcast. I appreciate you. And also to Double Sniffed, who supported us on Twitch for 3 years. Thanks for your sub, buddy. All right. And with that, I'll say good night, everybody. Double, you piece of shit. You don't get my support. You didn't show up to record, you dirty ass bastard. Fuck Reed, fuck you. All right. Good night, everybody.